Okay, today's daf is Daf Yadal and Masechta Moed Kattan. We're starting the third and final parak. The parak that discusses Hilchas Avelus Elu Megalchen. It will take us to the end of the Masechta. Starts the mission of Elu Megalchen Memayid. The following people are allowed to take a haircut, take a shave on Chol Hamoed. Meaning, generally speaking, it's usher for most people to take a haircut on Chol Hamoed. The mission is going to list those that are an exception. What are those people? Someone who's coming back from a trip and he's only arriving on Chol Hamoed. Or mi beis hashivya, a person who's in captivity, who's only released now that it's in the middle of Chol Hamoed. V'hayotz mi beis hasurin, and a person who is in prison, who is now released during Chol Hamoed. V'hamenuda, a person put in chayrim shi'ritir lechachamim, where the chachamim finally permitted him to come out of chayrim. They allowed him back into the community, and now he's allowed to go get a haircut. Until now, he was not allowed to get a haircut. V'chein mi she'nishal lechacham v'huter, a person who had a neder to not take a haircut, not to shave, and now the neder became uprooted by the Chachamim saying that it's mutter. He sat in front of a bezdin, mutalach, 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 just like we do on Rosh Hashanah by Hataras Nedarim. So too over here, Nazir, a person who's a Nazir who's not allowed to get a haircut the entire duration of his Nazirus, and now his Nazirus is over during the middle of Chol Hamoed. The Mitzayra, a person who's a Mitzayra, his Tahara process, the process he goes through to become Tahar, requires that he goes to the mikveh twice. Both times he's got to shave his entire body. So Hamitzayra, Ha'olam Mitumasul Taharaso is going to need to take that haircut. Obviously, the halacha is going to be for all of these people that they're allowed to do it. We'll see in the Gemara exactly what is the reason why these people are unique, different from the rest of us who are going to be usher. The Mishnah continues and says that not only is shaving usher, but there are exceptions. So too, laundering is usher on Chol Hamoed, but there are exceptions. What are the exceptions? The following people are allowed to do laundry on Chol Hamoed. A person who comes from a trip and he's only arriving in Chol Hamoed, he couldn't do it beforehand, so now he's allowed to do it. A person in captivity, a person comes back from prison. From the top of if a person's in chayrim, and now only during Chol Hamoed were the rabbis allowing him shetir lechachamim to come back into the community. So maybe now he'll be allowed to go get to go take his clothing to be cleaned, which was something that he wasn't supposed to do beforehand. A person who had a neder to not clean his clothes, and the neder became mutter al yedei hataras nedarim. Matapchos hayadayim. If we're talking about, we're moving from the people that are usher, that are mutter, to the items that are allowed to be cleaned. This would apply to even you and I. The tapchas yadayim, these are bath towels, hand towels that are used very often. They soil very quickly, and therefore, since you go through them very quickly, even if you prepared before Yom Tov by getting all of them cleaned, you'll go through them quickly, and they're going to be allowed to be cleaned. Umetapchis hasaparim, or the aprons of a barber, also you go through them very quickly. Umetapchis hasapag, or we're talking about bath towels. All of these cases would be mutter for a person to launder them on Chol Hamoed as well. Hazavin, v'hazavais, v'hanidas, v'hayolados. These are all different types of people who are going to need to go to the mikveh. And since they're going to need to go to the mikveh, also their kalim, their clothing needs to go to the mikveh so that it's not tummy anymore. And in order for that dip in the mikveh to be good, there can't be any chatzitzas, so they'll be allowed to launder the clothing in order to remove any stains so that there's no chatzitza, so that the mikveh will work. And therefore, v'chol ha'olam mitum l'tahara are also going to be mutar. Elu mutar, and this is going on the entire Mishnah, both for shaving and haircut and for laundry. That only these people are mutar. V'shar kol ha'adam asurin. Okay, fine. So it says in the Mishnah that all of these people have a heter. However, everyone else is asur. The question is why? For the Gemara, v'shar kol ha'adam ma'itayim asurin, meaning the pashtas, these should all be mutar because although it's malacha on Chol Hamoed, we know that tzarich hamayit should be mutar. So how come these are going to be asur? Meaning, why did we need to come on to the exceptions of these people? It should be mutter for everyone, even without these exceptions. So the Gemara says no. It's kiddutznan, like the Mishnah we learned in Tainus. What did we learn in Tainus? Anshe Mishmar, Anshe Mamed, the Kohanim and the Yisraelim who would work each one had a week where they would do the avoid in the Beis Hamikdash. This was considered a yontif for them. So the halacha is during their week of avodah, asurin l'sapro l'chabes, they have an issur to get a haircut. They have an issur to do laundry. However, ubi chamishi on Thursday, mutar mipnei kavod Shabbos, they're allowed to do it. Why? Because it's a kavod Shabbos. But what's the problem? The problem is that it's usher the rest of the time. Why is it usher? My time. Why is it usher during the entire week for them to get a haircut? Why is it usher for them to do any laundry? It's in order to make sure that if we make it usher for them to do it during the week, it'll force them to make sure that when they come to the Beis Hamikdash, they're already set up looking nice and makavadik for their week. Meaning if they show up looking all unkempt, they'll think to themselves, hey, you know what, I'll just go to the local barber when I show up to the Beis Hamikdash, and therefore it'll end up being a bizayon that they're walking in to do the avodah looking like they're not mechabed it. So to hachanami by yontif, we want to make sure people are going to be mechabed yontif properly. We therefore went ahead and said you can't get it done on chalamayit. Meaning we don't want to allow people to make the argument in their head. You know what? Hey, I'll just do it on chalamayit, and therefore I don't have to do it erev yontif. It's going to take away from the kavod yontif of preparing properly for yontif. So therefore, so to over here, it's going to be usher. And therefore, what are we saying? We're saying in the Mishnah that these people who have an excuse why erev yontif they weren't able to do the haircut or to do the laundry, therefore they would have a heter to do it on chalamayit. Now, boy Reb Zera had a question. Is it just enough that there was an onus, or are the people specifically in the Mishnah, are they unique in that not only do they have an onus, but also their onus is well known to people? Meaning everyone knows a person comes out of prison. Everyone knows when the mitzora or the menuda is going to become now allowed, because that's a public piece of information. Whereas what if it's a private onus? Let's say you have a person who lost an aveda. He's so fatumult figuring out where it is that he became so busy with that he didn't have a minute to go take a haircut. Kivan de honest mutter. Do we say that since he was an oines, he's allowed to go ahead and shave now? He's allowed to go take a haircut on chalamayit. So since it's not obvious, if someone were to see him getting that haircut in the middle of the week, they wouldn't know the reason why he couldn't do it erev yontif was because he was so busy and so tired, and therefore there's a problem of chshad, a problem of maras ayin. People are going to think that maybe you're allowed to go get a haircut on chalamayit. So therefore the halacha should be that it's usher. Meaning, do we look at the Mishnah and say dafka these people because the people in the Mishnah, it's very obvious as to why they're getting a haircut in the middle of chalamayit. So therefore, there's no problem of maras ayin. But if you don't have that public proof from your existence that it's obvious that you're only doing it because you couldn't do the onus beforehand, if the reason why you couldn't get the haircut beforehand is not obvious to people, they may incorrectly conclude that malacha is mutter on chalamayit. Amar Abaye has a problem. He says, "What are you telling me? You're telling me you only want the halacha to apply to those people who have an onus, but not to other people," meaning you're going to sort of split it and say that it's almost like there's two Torahs. The story is talking about Psachim, where when they would make their matzahs, people would want to go ahead and make certain types of like diagrams on the matzah and the way they baked it, and they would do it by hand. And Baitus, this person came along and made a suggestion to use sort of like a template that would basically prevent the matzah from becoming chametz, and so therefore it should be mutter. But since Baitus was the one who had this template, other people who don't have it, or maybe other people are going to see the matzah and they're not going to know how it was made. They're only going to see the matzah with the diagrams on it. They'll assume I could even do it via dime without a template, and it's going to come lidei chametz. So therefore, we answered it all across the board. So what Abaye is pointing out is that if you're going to say that a person who has an onus, erev yontiv, is going to be allowed to shave, to get a haircut on yontiv, on chalamayid, people aren't going to know what his onus was. They're going to assume that it must be its mutter to get a haircut on chalamayid, and that's going to be a problem. So the halach should be the same thing. So how can you say, Reb Zera, that there's even a tzad to say that he's mutter because it's an itis? But the response to that is, are you telling me there are absolutely no exceptions to the isser of getting a haircut on chalamayid, or to the isser of laundering on chalamayid? Everyone's masking to the halacha that if a person only has one shirt, he's allowed to do laundry on that shirt, even on chalamayid. Now, Chasam Nami, why not say Yom Kol Asrikan Asur and Sriki Baitus Mutar, and say the same argument that it should be a low plug across the board, and even he shouldn't be allowed to do it because of the concern. Elamai, what are you going to say? You're going to say that there are exceptions. You can have exceptions. Well, if you can have exceptions for him, why not have an exceptions for a person who is an onus erev yontif? So he should be allowed to go ahead and do laundry or to get a haircut on chalamayid. So the Gemara says no. The reason why over there, in the case of a person who only has one shirt, it's mutar ha'it maralav amar mar barav ashi a zuro mochiach alav. Since he's not going to have a shirt while he's doing the laundry on the shirt, he's going to have to sort of tighten up his jacket to cover his body up. He'll take his belt, his azuro, and sort of like tighten it up. It'll be very obvious while he's doing the laundry that the reason why he's doing it that way is because this is his only shirt, and therefore no one's going to incorrectly conclude that if I have a lot of shirts, I'm allowed to clean them. But if I only have one shirt, it's mutter. Masha Einkein, when a person is has an onus that happens privately to him, erev yontiv, and now he's going to get a haircut, no one knows about his private onus. Therefore, they're going to conclude that this guy's doing malacha. Must be I'm allowed to do a haircut on a cholamayit, and therefore it's a problem. Rav Ashi taught this whole entire discussion in a slightly different way, where Reb Zera's question wasn't a question of do we say a private onus is mutter, or do we say no, it needs to be a public onus. He takes on as a davar pasha that it has to be something that people know. Rather, he understands Reb Zera's question as follows: by Reb Zera, umin, a person who's the actual barber, sha'avdalei aveda erev regel, he himself had a private onus, where for him, it's private. But the problem is that everyone knows when they go show up to the barber's shop on Erev Yontif, and they see that he's trying to figure out where his Aveda is, they know that the reason why he couldn't take a haircut Erev Yontif was because he was busy. So now there's already a call. People know what's going on. So what's the halacha? Do we say Kivin de Uman Hu Chamilsa, since he's an Uman, and everyone's showing up to his shop, they're going to see that he's busy with his Aveda, therefore that's the reason why it's mutter for him to go get a haircut on Chalamayda. No one's going to incorrectly conclude that for me it's mutter also. They'll know that it's only when you have an Inus. But Dilma, no, we say since it's not completely obvious, kihanach, like the ones we have in the Mishnah, where it's super obvious, it's a public onus. Lo, meaning the shaila that Rav Ashi is quoting Reb Zera having asked is, do we say that it has to rise to the level of a public onus, like the ones in the Mishnah, or is it enough that there's a slight call, enough people are going to find out, and on that there's no real good answer? Teku says the Gemara will have to wait for Eliyahu and Navi to come. In Medina Sayyam, it said in the Mishnah that if a person is coming back from Medina Sayyam, whether we're talking about coming back for a haircut or we're talking about coming back for doing laundry, it said in the Mishnah that he's going to have a heter if he comes back, and it didn't give any qualification to why he left. So it must be our Mishnah, which seems to not be making a qualification. We did have a qualification. The time is the price. The person who comes back from Medina Sayyam should not take a haircut. Why? Because he left without rishus. Rashi over here says, since he did not go out through someone else's request, or maybe he had to because of someone else asking him, but rather he chose to go on his own. It's a pleasure trip, lav onus, so you can't consider someone an onus if he did it willingly, meaning he doesn't get to rely on the heter of a person coming back from Medina Sayyam and Chalamayit unless the reason why he left was out of his control. But if it was in his control to leave, then Zakir Yehuda, he doesn't have a heter, and therefore he's not going to be allowed to take a haircut on Chalamayit. So you see, that's not like our Mishnah, because our Mishnah doesn't seem to make a distinction between why he left. Amar Rava says no. Lasho divrei hakel aser. Rava says that everyone agrees, meaning the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda, meaning our Mishnah and Rabbi Yehuda both agree that the halach is it's going to be aser for a person coming back from a trip to take a haircut on Chalamayit if the reason why he left was just stamazai, he wanted to take a vacation. Lim is zaynus, but if he left for a basic sustenance, his basic parnasa, then divrei hakol mutter. Even Rabbi Yehuda will agree that it's mutter, because that's going to be almost like he was forced to go, because what do you mean? He's got to go make money. What's their argument? Their argument is only in a middle case, where he doesn't need the business trip in order to take care of his basic sustenance, but it's not a vacation. It is a business trip. He's just trying to profit a little extra. Rashi has an interesting lashon here, harbe. He has a good business. He makes a lot of money. He does well, but he wants to make some more. Is this considered like a vacation, in which case it's like not an onus, and therefore it's going to be us? Or no, we say this is all a tzorech, and since he needed to go, it's like it's not his fault, and therefore he'll be allowed to take a haircut if he shows up on Chalamayit. So Mar, Rabbi Yehuda says that it's also medamile kilush. He says this is basically like taking a vacation. Umar medamile, and the Chachamim say no, it's going to be mutter. Why? Because he says it's kil mizaynis. They compare it to mizaynis, which would be mutter. Meisvei Rava said that the distinction between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda is only in the case of harvacha, profit, but they both agree when it's basic sustenance, or that it's going to be mutter, and they both agree that when it's a vacation, it's going to be usher. I have a brayso that's mashma, not like that. What does the brayso say? Omer Rebbe said the following: Rebbe paskin the shaila between Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim as follows. Near into Rabbi Yehuda, he agrees with Rabbi Yehuda that it's going to be usher when kishiyat shalei b'rishus, when the person left shalei b'rishus. But Divrei Chachamim, and he paskin like the Chacham kishiyat b'rishus when he went out with rishus. So we asked the Gemara, what does Rebbe mean when he says rishus and shalei b'rishus? My shalei b'rishus. If it's talking about taking a vacation. Rav, you said everyone agrees there, so why would Rebbe be picking sides? The Elam is Elamite talking about where it's basic sustenance. That's also a problem, because you said everyone there agrees that it's mutter. So Weiter, why would he be picking any sides? The only way it makes sense for Rebbe to be picking and choosing would be, according to you, Rava, if he's picking and choosing where they have a machlekes. Which is where you say there's a machlekes. In which case, then, what is he saying? He's passing like Rabbi Yehuda when he's going out for a trip for harvacha, for profit, that if he shows up back on Cholamayah, the halach is going to be that it's aser. Aim a seifa, but the problem is, what does it say there? It says near and divrei chachamim kishiyatz b'rishus, that he holds like the chachamim, that it's going to be mutter to take the haircut on Cholamayah when he comes back, if the reason why he went out was b'rishus. So my b'rishus, what does it mean that he had rishus? It means that he went out for mizaynis. which is something what ha'amris divrei hakol mutter. Everyone agrees according to you, Rava, that's mutter. So why would you be picking sides in a machlekes? You don't have to paskin like the chachamim if Rabbi Yehuda and chachamim both agree over there. Elamai, what is it talking about? Velo laharvicha. It's talking about the middle case where they argue. In which case, then what? You're telling me that the halach is like the chachamim. But did you not just say above that in the ratio you hold like Rabbi Yehuda? Meaning the Gemara in a very long-winded fashion is essentially saying, according to you, Rava, the machlekes only exists when he takes a trip for harvacha. And yet, in the Reisha and the Seifa, he paskins in one place like Rabbi Yehuda, and in paskins like one place in the Chachamim. And if they can only argue in one case, according to Yerava, it doesn't make sense for Rabbi to be paskining like one and the other. He's got to pick one and stick with it. So therefore, it's mashma that the machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim isn't limited to only profit, but perhaps they argue in multiple cases, in which case it could be that the Bryce is just saying that Rabbi paskins like Rabbi Yehuda in the cases where it's a pure pleasure trip, and maybe he paskins like the Chachamim when it's a pure parnasa trip, and it's not Bechlal talking about harvacha. But Rava, according to you, it's fair. So Gemara says no. Rava says, I'll explain the Bryce in a way that not only is it not a kasha on me, but it comes out that what Rabbi Yehuda and Nasi is saying about the machlekes between the Chachamim and Rabbi Yehuda is exactly what Rava says. Hachi kamar near and divrei Rabbi Yehuda l'Rabbanan. The Rabbanan agreed to Rabbi Yehuda. Kisha yatsa shalei b'rishus. When you go out shalei b'rishus, which means what? Umayni ulashut. That means a vacation. Why? Shafilu Chachamim le'nechliku olav el laharvicha. The Chachamim are only arguing on Rabbi Yehuda and saying that it's mutter only when it's a profit trip of a lashut. But if it's a vacation, Moedele, the Levada agree, and therefore, in that scenario, the Rabbanan would agree to Rabbi Yehuda that it's usher if you're only doing it as a vacation. Veneer and Divrei Rabbanan Rabbi Yehuda, and the Rabbanan, Rabbi Yehuda is going to agree to the Rabbanan that it's mutter, kishiyasa b'rishus. And what does that mean? Umayni u'lemezainis. Rabbi Yehuda is going to agree to the Rabbanan that it's mutter to take a haircut if the reason why he left Erev Yantiv and only was able to come back on Chol Hamoed is because he needed it for his basic sustenance. Why? Shafilu Rabbi Yehuda lo'nechlek aleihem, because Rabbi Yehuda is only arguing on the Chachamim to say that it's usher only laharvicha, ela laharvicha, when he's taking a profit trip. But lemezainis aval mezainis maidalu, meaning, and it comes out that the way Rav is explaining the Brisa is that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was saying that the machlekes Rabbi Yehuda and the Chachamim is goof of the machlekes, the way Rav explained it only by harvacha. Everyone is masking by a mezainis trip, by a basic parnasa trip, that it's going to be mutter to take a haircut on Chol Hamoed. Everyone's masking that it's going to be usher if you're only taking a vacation, and that's why you're showing up on Chol Hamoed, that it's going to be usher to take a haircut on Chol Hamoed. Their argument is only when it's an in-between style, in which case then that's the machlekes. And it comes out in the end of the day that it could very well be that our Mishnah is even like Rabbi Yehuda, because the Mishnah just says that a person can take a haircut when he comes back from Medina Sayyam. It comes out of the maskana that according to Rabbi Yehuda, that'll be true as long as the reason why he left was lemezainis. Right? So therefore, Tosfos actually points this out. The bottom Tosfos says, but it's mashma from the Lashon HaBraisa, that since the Lashon HaBraisa is Rabbi Yehuda Omer, it's mashma he really is coming to be chaylik on the Mishnah. And therefore, the maskana of the Gemara would be that our Mishnah is the Chachamim, which could very well be that we're saying then that the halacha would be that laharvacha, you'd have a heter to take a haircut. Either way, not paskening shaylos. Continues the Gemara more about getting a haircut on Chol Hamoed. Amar Shmuel, Kattan, a baby, hanoyle b'moed, that is born on Chol Hamoed, muter legaleach b'moed. So there's a lot being said here. What we're saying, number one, is that a Kattan who needs a haircut, he's a baby, needs a haircut. I guess in those times they grew their hair a lot faster than our babies, or maybe he's one of those babies that have a lot of hair. Muter legaleach b'moed, he is allowed to get a haircut on Chol Hamoed, and Shmuel says his reason, she'ein lecha beis ha'asur and gadol mizeh. He says if the Mishnah says that a person's in prison and he's only coming out of prison on Chol Hamoed, he's allowed to get a haircut. Well, a baby who was in prison, so to speak, he was inside his mother's womb, obviously couldn't get a haircut there. Ein lecha beis asur and gadol mizeh. So certainly he would be allowed to get a haircut on Chol Hamoed. Now the problem is that Shmuel's halacha seems to only apply on Chol Hamoed. If he's born on Chol Hamoed and he didn't have an opportunity before Yantiv to get a haircut, then we say he's mutter for him to take a haircut on Chol Hamoed. Mashma what? B'moed ed me'ikar alay. If he was born before Yantiv, and only now on Chol Hamoed he needs to take a haircut, it would be usher. And the reason will be because he's no different than anyone else. Now, that in and of itself isn't the problem. The problem with that is the following. Moshe Rav Pinchas says, we know there's a Brisa. The Brisa says the following. Kol Elu, all the people listed in our Mishnah, Sha'amru muter legaleach b'moed, that have a heter to take a haircut on Chol Hamoed, muter legaleach b'yamei avlai, they're allowed to go ahead and take a haircut also during Shloshim of their Avelis. We know that if a person's in Avel, for the 30 days after the mace dies, the halacha is he's not allowed to take a haircut, not allowed to take a shave. Right? So during that time, who is allowed to and who is not allowed to take a shave, take a haircut? So what the Brisa says is, if you want to know, go take a look at the Mishnah on your Gimel Amud Beis and Moed Kattan. Whoever over there is allowed to take a haircut during the Chol Hamoed will be allowed to take a haircut during his Avelis. So there's a diuk. What's the inference? The inference is that's mashma ha asur legaleach b'moed. Anyone who's not allowed to take a haircut on Chol Hamoed, Also, we'll have an isser to shave and take a haircut during his able. Now, what does that mean? That implies that what we just said from Shmuel was that who would be usher to take a haircut on Chalamayid, a baby that's born Erev Yontif, and now it's on Chalamayid, and he's going to not be allowed to take a haircut. And we'll extrapolate from there that if that's true, then it must be that he's also usher if that Nebuch baby it turns out to be an avel, meaning he loses his father, his mother, whatever it is. So the halacha would be that he would not be allowed to take a haircut because the same halacha. If he's not allowed to take a haircut on Chalamayid, he shouldn't be allowed to take a haircut on during his avelis. Meaning, again, the Gemara is basically pointing out that if I have a brisa that says connect avelos to Chalamayid, when you're talking about the halacha of whether you're allowed to get a haircut. If that's true, and you're telling me that a katan is not allowed to take a haircut on Chalamayid if he's born before Chalamayid, so then so too the halacha should be that he should not be allowed to get a haircut during his avelis, which is mashma that we're noeg dini avelis. Now, why is that a problem? We're going to see that the halacha is you're not noeg dini avelis by a katan, and that's what the Gemara is going to speak out. The E, as we flip over, amris katan is be plukta, if you're going to tell me that the diak in Shmuel is true, that it's only if the katan is born on Chalamayid would he be allowed to take a haircut on Chalamayid, but if he's born before Yontif, then we say that he doesn't have the heter of the Mishnah. If you'll say that that's true, Nim says, and we of course then implicitly say that he's also now going to have an isser to take a haircut while he's an avel, it's nimtis avelos nehegas b'katan. It comes out according to you that you're going to have avelos by a katan because he's not going to be allowed to take a haircut during his avelos. Now, how do we know that a katan is not noyek dini avelos? Because of the brisa. The brisa says the following: V'hatanya mikarin lekatan. We know that normally when someone's an avel, he has to rice kriya, has to tear kriya, right? So the halacha is that we tear that kriya on an adult. It's mashma over here that we even do it on a katan. However, it gives a reason. What's the reason? Mipnei agmas nefesh. Agmas nefesh. Rashi speaks out over here. Sheyivku haroin. It's only for the people that are around him to inspire them to cry. The yirbu b'kavod hameis. So it's a kavod hameis to have the child tear kriya. Why? So that the people around him will cry also. However, Rashi explains v'loy mipnei shehu avel. Meaning, Avada, the katan himself is not noyek dini avelis himself. It's only that we do it to inspire other people to be mitzdaref with as a kavod hameis. So what do you see? You see that there's no dinim of avelis noyek b'katan. But according to our math, what we just figured out was that Shmuel holds a katan is only allowed to get a haircut on Chalamayid if he's born on Chalamayid. But if he's born Erev Yontiv, then he's not allowed to take a haircut on Chalamayid. And then the brisa said that the dinim of the Isser haircut on Chalamayid are the source for the halachas of the Isser haircut on during Avelos. And if that's the case, that a katan is not allowed to get a haircut on Chalamayid, then it comes out he's not allowed to get a haircut as an Avel, which means you're noyek dine Avelos by a katan, and that's a steer to the brisa. So the Gemara says, 1 second. Amar Rav Ashi, your math sounds good, but your assumption in the diak from the brisa is wrong. What did the brisa say? The brisa said whoever's allowed to take a haircut on Chalamayid is allowed to take a haircut during his avelos. It didn't say anything about who's not allowed to take a haircut during Chalamayid. All it said was who was allowed to. Amar Rav Ashi, mikatani ha'asurin, was the diak from the Mishnah who's from the brisa, who's usher on Chalamayid is going to be usher on during Avelis? No, it only said who's mutter. So therefore, Dilma, it could be very well that a person who's usher on Chalamayid, Dilma yesh mehen usher, there are those who are also usher by Avelis, meaning maybe an adult. The yesh mehen mutter, but a katan is going to be mutter, and lo'elam you have no raya. There's no problem of Avelis, and lo'elam Shmuel's din could sit. It could very well be that a katan is not allowed to get a haircut on Chalamayid, and that's not a problem. Mitzad the din of Avelos, it'll lo'elam be mut. Gemara says this entire discussion of Shmuel's din was being said that before Yontif he's born, it's going to be usher on Chalamayid to take a haircut. But if he's born on Chalamayid, then it's going to be mutter. And then we had a kasha on that from the din of Avelos of a katan. That conversation was taught slightly differently. And in this scenario, Shmuel's statement was being made, it doesn't make a difference whether the katan was born on Chalamayid or beforehand. The halach is he's always going to be allowed to get a haircut on Chalamayid. They taught the conversation as follows. Shmuel said katan is allowed to get a haircut on Chalamayid. Doesn't make a difference when he was born. There is no iser taspairis. There is no iser kiluach for a katan. A baby, no matter when he's born, a katan is allowed to take a haircut on Chalamayid. Now, this statement being true, even if he's born before Yontif, the Gemara wants to bring a raya. Amar Pinchas, af ananami tanina. We can bring a raya to this din that even if he's born before, it's going to be mutter for him to take a haircut. Why? Because what happens if the halach? Because if the halacha would be that it would be usher to take a haircut, that'll be a steer to the following brisa. Af ananami tanina. It says in the following brisa, Kol elu she'amru mutar legalech b'mayit, mutar legalech b'mayavloi. Anyone who is allowed to take a haircut on Chalamayit is allowed to take a haircut during his Avel. What do you see? You see ha'asur legalech b'mayit. Someone who's not allowed to take a haircut on Chalamayit is going to be also legalech b'mayavloi. So what do you see? You see that if a person's going to be also to take a haircut on Chalamayit, it'll be also to have an Avelis. And he amris, and if you were to say that Shmuel's din does not apply even when the baby's born before Yontif, that Katan Asr on Chalamayid when that happens, Nim says Avelus Nehegas Bekatan. It'll come out Lafi the same cheshbon we said earlier, that since the Katan is not allowed to get a haircut on Chalamayid when he's born before Yontif, it'll come out that he's also to get a haircut while he's in Avel. Why is that true? We know that the dinim of Avelus are not Neheg Bekatan. Vitanya, the Brisa says, Mekaran Lekatan Miminag Masnefesh, but not because he's an Avel. So you see, Elamai must be that Shmuel's din was said not only on Chalamayid if he's born on Chalamayid, but even if he's born before Chalamayid, Allah is going to be that he's allowed to get a heter. The Gemara wants to use it as a raya. Before we asked it as a kasha, now we're bringing it as a raya. Amar Ravashi, no raya. Same exact reason. Tani ha'asur, that it ever say in the brisa that Reb Pinchas brought that the Isser of getting a haircut by Avel is learned from the Isser on Chalamayid. No, it just said the heter on during Avelus is learned from the heter by Chalamayid. But it could very well be that there are people who are usher to get a haircut on Chalamayid that it would be mutter on Avelus. Dilma yesh mehen os v'yesh mehen mutter, and even a katan is going to be mutter. Okay, the Gemara continues and continuing to talk about the dinim of Avelus. And it says in Avel, if Yontif comes while he's in Avel, or if he becomes an Avel on Yontif, the halach is Avelus stops and his dinim Yontif will continue. Meaning there's a stira. To go ahead and be an Avel means you have to be sad. To be on Yontif means you have to be besimcha. That's a stira. You have an isser of being Avelus on Yontif, because Yontif is a din of samachta b'chagecha. So you see clearly that you have to pick one or the other. Zok the Gemara, only Avelos. When Avelos hits Yontiv, Yontiv is Docha Avelos and not the other way around. And the Gemara speaks it out. I Avelos demi karahu, if he's first in Avel, and then what comes Yontiv. So now Asi Asei the Rabbim, Samachta b'chagecha, V'dachi Asei the Yachin, and pushes off the Asei the Yachin of Avelos, because a Yachin of a Rabbim is going to be pushing off an Asei the Yachin. The Avelus, the Hashtahu, and if it's first Yontiv and only now becomes an Avel on Yontiv, then we'll say the same thing, but just the opposite. We don't say Lo Asi Asei the Yachid of Avelus, V'dachi Asei the Rabbim. Okay, fine. So the halacha is that no matter what we're talking about, the halacha of Avelus is always going to be pushed off because of Simchas Yontiv. Menuda, a person who's in Chayrim, what about him? We just said that an Avel on Yontiv has no dinim of Avelus. What about a Menuda? A person's in Chayrim, he's got to take off shoes, he's got to dress a certain way, can't get haircuts, can't do these things. What's halacha? Is he allowed to be in? Do we say that he's still benidui on Yontiv, or does it stop? So Mahu Sheyinug Nidui Beregel. Amr Rav Yosef, I'll bring you a raya from a brayse, Tashma. The brayse says as follows: Don in dine nefashis, v'dine makis, v'dine mammons. We dan shilas. We open bezdin to capital cases, malchus cases, and financial cases, and we paskin these shilas even on chalamayid. Now the Gemara says like this: Zok Rav Yosef, what's the raya from there? V'i loit sayis dina. What happens if someone paskins a mammon as shilah, and the person who is chayiv comes out chayiv money doesn't follow bezdin? So what's the halacha? That's exactly a case where what do? Mishamtinalei. Our only recourse at that point is to put him in chayrim. Now, if you tell me, you're going to tell me that that once Yontiv comes, we pause the dinim of nidui. Can it make sense that mishumat v'asi miikara, a person who's already been nidui, asi regel dachile, and Yontiv is going to push it off, and now we're going to be passing shilas on Yontiv, hashda mishamtinalei anan, we're going to go ahead and put him in chayrim if he doesn't listen to it. Avada, that's not the case. So since we're passing shilas on Yontiv, on chalamayid, it must mean we can put him in nidui. And if we can put him in nidui, it must mean that nidui is noyeg on chalamayid, on Yontiv. So l'chayr zokt Rav Yosef, I have a raya to the shaila of whether a menuda is chayiv, is going to have din, is noyeg din nidui beregel. Amalei Abaye says no, maybe not. Maybe Abaye holds maybe the nidui is not noyeg by Yontiv. And Amalei Abaye v'dilma li'iyuna bedina. Maybe what it means in the brayse is that we're dan din in nefasha is din mak is din maminas. And it doesn't mean we actually paskin the shaila. It just means we'll sit in bezdin, we'll discuss the sugya, we'll learn it up, we'll analyze it. But we don't actually paskin the shaila that we can come to a question of whether we'll put someone in chayrim or not. Rather, we'll paskin the shaila afterwards. And Abaye says it's not just that I think that that's a good argument. He says I'll bring you a raya that's the case from the Mishnah, it's from the Bryce itself. The loy temahachi. If you don't say that, if you say that rather you're paskining shailas, Are you saying that that's true also for Dina and Nefasha for capital cases? Dina and Nefasha, the Ktani, Hachanami, the Katlin online. You're going to go ahead and kill him if you find out that he's Chayiv Misa. Is that really true? Don't we not know that the halacha is meaning the Dayanim, the judges, if they're the ones who end up passing on him that he's Chayiv Misa and they kill him, we know the halacha is they're not allowed to eat. How do I know that? The Tanya, the Brisa says, Rebbe Kiva Minayin Sanhedrin. Nefesh, Shein Toyim in Kolois Ayam. Where do I know that a Sanhedrin that ends up killing someone because he's Chayiv Misa in Bezdin, that they're not allowed to eat? Talmud Loimar, Lo Yisaychlu Al Adam, you shall not eat on blood, meaning if you take blood, you shall not eat. There's an Isser to eat if you are part of a Bezdin that passed on someone that is Chayiv Misa and you took his life. Again, it was Mikra Din, you were allowed to do it. Of course, that's your responsibilities as a Bezdin. But the halacha is, as a consequence of that, is you're not supposed to be B'Simcha. And that's a problem. Why? Because we know there's a din of Simchas Yontiv. And it'll come out that if you pass in the Shiloh Din and Nefashos, capital case, it's going to come out, you're going to be being you're being mevatel mitzvah of samachta b'chagecha. So elamai, it must be elo le'yuda b'dina. It only means that you analyze the case, but you hold off on passing it until after yontiv. So then, so too hachanami must be by the financial case. It's also only an analysis le'yuna b'dina, but not a psak. So therefore, there's no raya that you're noeg dinu nidui on chalamayid, because it could lo'olam be that the psak doesn't happen till later. Amalei says no. That can't be, because it can't be that for a capital case you're going to sit, analyze the din, and the guy's going to be sitting there waiting to find out, am I dying or am I not dying? Right? Avada the halacha is going to be that if you're going to analyze the case, you have to pass in it. So okay, well, so then what's the pshat? Meaning, if you're going to do that, you're going to be losing simchas yontiv, and that can't be. So he says, no, this is what they do. Also mitzafar, they come in the morning, and they analyze the case. They don't pass in it. They go home, they eat lunch, they have simchas yontiv, they have their suda, and before the end of the day, before the day is over, so that you're not delaying or causing unneeded suffering to the person, you come back in, v'gamrina l'dina, you finish the din, and if it turns out that he's chayiv misa, v'katala, you kill him. Meaning, la'olam, you can accomplish paskening the shaila by a capital case without having a problem of losing out on simchas yontiv. So too, you can have a financial case paskent, and if the guy doesn't listen to the din, you could send him to Nidui. Meaning what? You see that it could very well be, I have a raya from this brisa that Nidui is takanoyek during yontiv, and that'll be the answer to the shaila. Now Abaye, who didn't want to say that, he says, no, I'll bring a raya from a different brisa. Amar Abaye Tashma. The brisa says the following: Our Mishnah. What does our Mishnah say? That the isser of getting a haircut on chalamayid is mutter for a person who's been nidui. So what do you see? You see that nidui is mutter on chalamayid. So it sounds like the chachamim were matir nidui. So it must be that nidui is not noyeg on chalamayid, not noyeg on yantiv. And Abaye wants to say you have a raya from there. Rava no raya. Why? Because mikatani shehitiru chamim. Does it say that they completely were matir the concept of nidui? No. Shehitiru loy chachamim. It's mashma that the chachamim were specifically matering it for this specific person. The azul faisal abaldini, because he went to the person who owed him money. Let's say Reuven claimed that Shimon owed him $100, and Bezdin Paskin that Shimon owes him the money, and Shimon's not paying, and now they put him in nidui. So what happened? Now all of a sudden he went to ask him. He wanted to pay him back, and he felt bad. He convinced him to pay the money back, and now they've coming to the rabbanon. They went in front of the rabbi and said, "Look, he took care of his chov. Can you take him out on nidui b'sharli?" And they were matir him. That's the case in the Mishnah. Lo'olam is no raya. The maskana is like a sugya. It's not a raya one way or the other, although it does seem from the first case that's a shtickle more of a raya. Abaye clearly holds that nidui is not noyek. And for halacha l'maaseh, ask your local Orthodox rabbi. We'll pause here. We'll pick up from Mitzayir tomorrow. Mitzvah.